Okay, thank you, Marinisha. So, welcome everyone to our MEG Talks on Who Opens the Door, Creating Youth Employment Opportunities in a Challenging World. So, before I go any further, I'd just like to let everyone know, as you probably saw that it came up, that the session is being recorded and it will be posted on our website later. So, my name is Vesna, and I am the president of the board of directors of Margaret McNamara Education Grants, otherwise known as MEG or MMEG. I prefer MEG, it's easier to say. Thank you all for being here. A warm welcome to our two MEG grantee panelists, to any friends of MEG who are joining us, to MEG board members, and any MEG volunteers who are joining today. And a special welcome also, I don't know if there are any with us today, to other MEG grantees who might have joined, and we appreciate you all very much and are very happy to see you participate. And I just wanted to say, if you are a MEG grantee working in the same field, the labor market, unemployment or youth, any other issues affecting the youth, or you have an interest in this area, you'd like to network, please don't hesitate to contact the two grantee panelists who are here today, or put your details in the chat if you want to talk with anyone. Because MEG Talks are, they're not only a wonderful way to showcase the incredible work that our grantees are doing, they're also very good networking opportunities, which can lead to, and we know they have, to some fruitful collaborations. So let me introduce our panelists. So first of all, let me talk about Obaa Konadu-Osei, who is from Ghana and who received the MEG grant in 2021. She is an international development scholar and practitioner whose work focuses on youth development, women's empowerment, and human capital development in Africa. Obaa holds a PhD in business management and administration and a master's in development planning and management. She has served as a member of the UN Generation Equality Youth Task Force and the World Economic Forum Global Shapers Community, and her research and work in collaboration with young people, governments, and development partners aims to contribute to creating inclusive pathways into dignified work for Africa's youth. So welcome, Obaa. Next, we have Elizabeth Shawa-Mangani. Elizabeth is from Malawi. Elizabeth received the MEG grant in 2019. Elizabeth is a development practitioner with a 15-year track record in community development, academia, research, and youth activism. As a youth advocate, Elizabeth works and publishes on cross-cutting youth and development issues. She's currently a lecturer in strategic diplomacy and research practice at the University of Johannesburg's Johannesburg Business School, and a research fellow at the University of Pretoria, where she's working on a development studies project titled The Youth Unemployment Crisis, Land Reform and Agriculture. So welcome, Elizabeth. Last, but certainly not least, let me introduce our moderator today, Marinisha Ahmed. Marinisha has been a member of the MEG Board of Directors since 2021, following a long career at the International Finance Corporation. She currently, among other things, leads our MEG Talks and our Grantee Impact Studies committees. So it is my pleasure to hand you over to Marinisha to get our session started.
Thank you, Vesna. Welcome, everyone. I'm very glad to see that you're with us today. I'm very proud on behalf of MEG to welcome Obaa and Elizabeth. Youth employment remains one of the most pressing challenges in the world today, and how delighted are we at MEG that we have two grantees who can not only talk about their ideas, but the work that they're doing on this. So we look forward very much to hearing from you. I know that in the few times that I've spoken to both of our grantees before this talk, I have been so impressed, but by their ideas and their experience, and I can't wait to hear more. Before we go into the actual talk, just a few points on format. We only have an hour, and in order that we make the best use of that time, we're going to start with introductions from Obaa and Elizabeth telling us about who they are, what they do, and their interest. We're then going to ask them a few questions, and for the last 20 minutes of the talk, we will open up to questions from the floor. I would ask you, please, that if you have any questions before then, to hold them and not interrupt the speakers. Please all keep your devices on mute unless you're speaking. And I'm going to shamelessly use this opportunity to make a plug for MEG, for those of you who aren't with MEG right now, to say that the World Bank's Community Connections Campaign and the IMF's Community Connections Campaign will both match any donation that you make to MEG until, I think it's the 18th of December for the World Bank and the 6th of January for the IMF. So please, I encourage you, if you haven't donated, if family or friends, or if you are a member or a retiree of the bank or the IMF, please make a donation to MEG, because your money is going to help educate even more amazing women like the two that we have with us today. Thank you. And with that, I am going to hand over to Elizabeth, who will start. I think she's going to show a few slides. Over to you, Elizabeth.
Well, thank you very much, Manisha, for that introduction. And first of all, I would like to say thank you for thinking about me, that I should be part of the talks. Well, youth unemployment is really a sector that I'm interested in. As you see, I think let's go to the next slide, which I actually just given a little hint of what I've been doing. So there, as you can see, for the PhD, which was funded by MEG, thank you for that. I was looking at youth unemployment, and that was from a policy perspective. And when I finished that study, that's when I also got into a postdoc. They were very much interested in that study because we know, especially for the South African context, as we know that South Africa is facing huge challenges when it comes to youth unemployment. And I think it was 3 years ago when it was actually declared as a crisis. So youth unemployment has always been at the heart of what I do. Probably maybe also because I have been a young person before and looking for work, and what it actually means to be a young person and not employed, but also working in an academic space where there are a lot of young people that come into the programs, and then at the end of the day, then I always get the same feeling. What is it? What should I do after I have done this? What should I do after getting my degree? What should I do? So it really is a combination of a lot of things that has impacted me to look further into what youth unemployment is. And I hope we'll discuss it a little bit more when we're talking about the questions, and also from the feedback from others that have joined us. And also in brief, I had those 2 slides, and I just wanted to share with you some of the other work that I do apart from just being in the academic space as well. So as you can see there, it says ACADES AI for Change. ACADES is an organization that is in Malawi, and it is working with young people. I joined ACADES around the same time when I was doing my PhD. And at that time, it was just a group of young people that were saying, okay, fine, we have unemployment. This is in Malawi. That is in Malawi now. There's a lot of young people that are unemployed in the country. But somehow what stood out was that most of Malawi's GDP, I think about 40%, comes from the agriculture sector. And then somehow young people were not involved in that sector. And now through my research, that's when I actually got to find out that there's a lot of also stereotypes that goes around in terms of when we're talking about the jobs that need to be created. What are the kind of jobs that young people are talking about? Or what are the kind of jobs that young people are expecting? And how do they differ from men to, from young women to young men? Is there any differences? So now, one thing that we did find out is that when it comes to agriculture, which seems to be a backbone of many African countries, somehow young people were not really interested in that agriculture sector. And so with some of my friends, we're just trying to brainstorm and say, how do we get young people to be interested in agriculture? Because the whole stereotypes around agriculture has to do with a lot of young people think agriculture is a sector for those that are not educated. It's kind of a fallback plan. So it means you have looked for jobs elsewhere, and then this is like your plan B. But also the parents themselves, they're not really, they don't get excited when a young person says, I want to join the sector. So that Akares AI for Change came up with those type of stereotypes in our background, and we said, okay, so how can we make agriculture kind of exciting for young people? That's when we came up with that AI for Change, that a lot of young people want to work in sectors that are mostly aligned to technology, and somehow agriculture wasn't part of that relationship of agriculture and technology. So it's just one of the projects that we're saying, okay, fine, we can try to attract young people to come into the sector, but we can actually also combine technology and agriculture to be one thing. So yeah, just in brief, that's what that AI for Change talks about. And then there was also the other program, the last slide, which I'm also quite involved in. This one actually gets me excited because this one actually deals with young women. So it all goes back to the whole kind of stereotypes. I think that's why even on the first slide, I talked about, I wrote something like stereotypes when it comes to unemployment. So even with this program as well, there's a lot of stereotypes when it comes to young people. For example, football as a career. Just to start with, sport is not really regarded as a career per se. Parents, even friends, they say, no, you can't go into sports. There's nothing that you can really get from sports. And then also being the fact that young women themselves wanting to involve themselves in sport and football, then also it becomes a whole complicated thing. So that other second program has to do with young people, young women, and saying, no, you can actually do, those that are interested in football, no, you can actually take sport or football as a career. It can also give you a good livelihood if you want to be part of. So just in general, those two programs are kind of breaking certain stereotypes that revolves around unemployment in terms of which sectors are you supposed to come in, which sectors young people are supposed to come in, which sectors women themselves are supposed to come in, and the expectations be it from society, but also expectations even from the parents themselves and the young people themselves. So yeah, I think in brief, that is what I just wanted to share about myself, that apart from the academic side, but there are also several programs that I'm involved in, and they're directly related to young people. Thank you, Menisha. I hope I didn't take a lot of time.
Not at all. Thank you. It was very interesting to hear what you're doing, what you have been doing, and we look forward to hearing some more. I'm going to hand over to Obaa now and ask her to give us a quick intro and some background, please.
All right. Thank you so much. And again, also my deepest gratitude to the team for extending the invitation to me. As mentioned previously, my name is Obaa, 2021 grantee. And I got this grant whilst doing my PhD at Stellenbosch University, and my PhD focused on women's upward mobility in male-dominated jobs. Now, I find it quite difficult to provide a label to describe who I am professionally, and so I like to think of myself as being all these buzzwords, so development planner, lecturer, researcher, program manager. And next slide, please. I'd like to also share my academic journey as a way to also give the audience a bit of an understanding of who I am in terms of my academic background. So I do have a multidisciplinary background, and these disciplines sort of shape the way I also then think about certain phenomena that I am, talking about. Next slide, please. When it comes to the kind of work I've done, I've worked mainly in the intersection of youth, gender, and sustainable development, generally mainly in Africa. And I would like to just illustrate a few of the work that I've done, just to also give you a bit of an idea of some of the examples that I'll be giving perhaps throughout the talk. So I will reflect on a few of them. Perhaps I'll start off with my engagement as a policy and advocacy manager at the youth-focused NGO in Ghana, where, previous slide, please, where I manage a number of projects, and I would just like to talk about the SDG Youth Action, where we sought to improve knowledge and also galvanize youth support on the achievement of the SDGs. And I also had the pleasure of working with the Social Protection and Jobs Unit of the Ghana Office of the World Bank as an African Fellow and later Gender and Youth Specialist. And I was involved in a scoping study that focused on young single women's reintegration into the labor market in the Gambia. And for me, that was a really exciting and also eye-opening experience to also understand a group that I hadn't previously worked with, young single women. And so for me, that was a very useful experience that I got. And currently, I'm working on a research project that explores cost of politics from the perspective of young Ghanaian women and men, parliamentary aspirants, to really understand what their experiences, their comparative experiences with aspiring to become members of parliament in the Ghanaian parliament has been. And among other things, I also teach on the BSc Global Studies program at Maastricht University, where I teach a number of courses relating to gender and development, urban development and poverty, migration and citizenship. And so hopefully all these can come in as useful insights for this talk.
The other one is after.
Next slide, please.
It's there with the people where she's a
And
lot of bloody acronyms. Sorry, I laughed.
No, I didn't say
No.
which was better.
Yeah.
I just said there were
She's-
different places.
yeah.
And so sort of going back to, Manisha, do you want to?
Sorry, I think they've muted. I apologize. I was going to ask them to go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
All right, okay, sure. So the reason why I'm interested in this particular topic is for a number of reasons. So for me, it's mainly because of the timeliness and the relevance of the topic. So when I reflect on the fact that Africa's population, for example, is very youthful, so the statistics suggest that Africa's population is pretty much about 60% youth. But the paradox is that the doors to decent work remains the narrowest. And so beyond the doors being narrow, when I think about a door, I also visualize, I try to visualize some of these ideas quite a bit. I think of a door that as something that is attached to a frame, and for this door to be optimally functional and useful, the frame needs to be secure and firm. But in the case of, the doors to decent work in Africa, we see that the frames tend to be still very much stressed. And so we can think of fragmented policies, we can think about our development models still very much stifling, employment opportunities that have been created. And so when we think about who opens the doors, I think that it goes beyond, technicalities, but one that is really political and invites us to interrogate and, unpack which doors are we even talking about, for whom, who decides these doors, whose futures are we sort of designing for when we talk about opening doors. And also, again, when we talk about the global development agenda, or also, of course, the continental development agenda, be it the SDGs or the Africa we want, we won't be able to make significant achievement or be able to make significant gains if we structurally lock out the majority of Africa's population, for example, out of accessing decent livelihoods. And so hopefully we can look at some of the structural barriers and of course some of the opportunities that exist at various levels that can help widen the doors, and also, interrogate how some of these levels also reinforce corridors that just allow a few people to, gain access. And so hopefully I'm hoping that by the end of this talk, we would have considered the logics of work that young people undertake that allow them to survive despite these limitations. Thank you.
Thank you, Obaa. A lot to think about and some great ideas. I'd like to switch now to actually ask you both the same question and hear what your responses are. My first question to you is, which groups of young people are being left behind and why? What is your opinion, Elizabeth?
So this is also based on some of the findings that I found. It still feels, or it still shows, that most of those that are left behind are those that are in the rural settings. Because they're the ones that have problems getting access to education. They still have problems getting access to job opportunities out there. So I think that's a group that is still left behind, those that are in rural settings, compared to those that are in urban settings, where it appears to be, at least they can have a chance to find more businesses. So I think I would say those that are in the rural settings. But also, as we know, when we're talking about young people, we are talking about a certain age bracket as well. And I think when it comes to youth studies, it has always been a problem in terms of who is a young person and who is not a young person, which age bracket is a young person supposed to be in. So you see, even in Africa in general, you see that in other countries, a young person is below the ages of 24. And then you have, in other settings, it's below the ages of 29. And then in other settings, it's below ages of 35. So even the whole concept of who a young person is then also becomes problematic, and then it also impacts on then who is it really is affected the most. Is it those that are below 24? Is it those that are in the ages of 29 and 35? But just a bit of my understanding, I would feel like those that are mostly in the ages of, oh, I can't see myself. I hope you can still see me.
We can still hear you. We can still hear you.
Oh, okay, fine. I don't know what happened, but I just can't see. Okay, fine. Yeah, but I would also think that when it comes to that age bracket, or I think those that are below, I would say in the ages of below 25, those that are just coming out, let's say, of university, or those that did their high school and stuff, because those are the ones that they don't have work experience. They're just coming out. For those that are lucky enough that they've gone to college or university, but then they don't have experience, and then now they want to get into that sector, and then they're told, okay, fine, you need to have 15 years of experience. And then this young person gets frustrated. Okay, I've gotten my degree, but then I don't have work experience. Then what am I going to do with my degree? And what happens is that then they want to do another degree. They want to do another degree. And I'm saying this because I'm in the university and academic spaces where literally I have young people that have got 3 degrees. And when I get to ask them, why are you doing this? And they say, yeah, because when I finished the first one, I didn't get a chance to, okay, I think, oh, okay, fine. I think I did it switched off. Yeah. So I ask them, and then they say, no, the reason why I'm doing my 3rd degree, or is it my 3rd diploma, is because when I finished the first one, I didn't get a job, and then I have to continue. So yeah, I think that age group that is just finishing up the university, yeah, and the rural population, of course. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Thank you. Obaa, anything to add to that?
Yes. Indeed, I agree with Elizabeth, and I'll hold the age bit constant and talk about other demographic descriptors to think about, some of the left behind youth. Indeed, rural youth are left behind, and this I saw from my SDG work, because it took me around the country of Ghana, and I really did see the distinctions between the kinds of access that rural youth have, and also predominantly what urban youth have. But that notwithstanding, I still think that even within the urban, we can also very much look at low-income youth, because they also then do see the opportunities within the urban space, but sometimes do have very limited social capital and network to access them. And so they also find very different, set of restrictions that in the midst of plenty, they still tend to have very limited access. But what I do see is some form of resourcefulness that still comes with that group that are still able to create on the margins of the economies, the urban economies, to still, find a way of making a living for themselves. I also think that young women sometimes are left behind. And again, also stemming from the scoping study I did in the Gambia. So for these single young mothers, mainly because of the burden of unpaid care work, they are very much limited in terms of the range of jobs that they could perhaps pursue. And so they tend to be very much concentrated in the low-paying sector jobs because these jobs tend to be a bit more flexible to be able to accommodate for the burden of unpaid care work. There's, of course, also young people not in education, employment, or training, also very much limited because if they do not have access to, for example, formal skilling or credentials, then of course, they also do have very limited access to formal job opportunities. Another group that sometimes unintentionally left behind would be young people with disability. And I think that, again, I say unintentionally because of the range of disability that could, be considered. And so almost invariably, we find jobs that not by design tend to exclude them, right? And so then again, if structurally they are not able to access these, then of course, they also are left behind. And perhaps lastly, young people with a migration background, and again, the rural-urban dynamics also come in here. So I can give an example from Ghana, where we do see rural-urban migration, particularly within the urban centers, attracting young women from perhaps mostly the north of Ghana, coming from usually very difficult circumstances, working as headquarters in these urban centers. So it's really not dignified work, but again, one has to make a living. And so these are some of the low entry jobs that they tend to access. And so for me, in as much as yes, the bit about age is really important, I think that these are also other, demographic descriptors that we can consider when, thinking about left behind youth.
Thank you, Obaa. Again, you've both given us things to think about. Can we move to the second question I have for you is, in your opinions, what are the biggest structural barriers that are preventing youth from entering the workforce today? Elizabeth, would you like to start? Or whoever, actually, I'll leave it to whoever wants to start. I won't select. Whoever would like to go for the, answer that one.
Elizabeth, you can go ahead.
Okay, so I think when it comes to structural barriers, I think there are certain things that several things that we can talk about. I think first of all, it's the issue of policy, and I think I don't know how best to put this, but I think in most of our African settings, policies have just become political tools. So it's like a policy becomes a political tool because you have to say nice things. You have to say nice things, you have to say interesting things, and because when you say those nice things, and then you're going to be voted into power. And unfortunately, I think at the beginning, who was it who was saying we've been talking about women's empowerment for a long time, and I was about to say we have been talking also about youth empowerment and youth unemployment for quite a better number of years, but it just becomes a political tool. So if you put it there, then everyone gets excited, and then they say, oh yeah, this government that comes in is going to talk about you. Remember, it's what Obaa was saying, that the demographics themselves, that the fact that 60% of Africans are young people, right? Then already we are also saying that this 60%, probably 50% are the ones that are going to vote. So you have to speak the language that you have to tell them what they want to hear, but you don't actually mean it. So I think the biggest problem is policies have become political tools. We put everything there, we put strategies there, but it's one of those things that when you put it and people get excited, but what is being done is not really what is in that policy. I think that's the most fair way I can put it. Policy becoming a political tool. Yeah. And youth unemployment just becoming one of those buzzwords that everyone just throws around and not much really is changing. Yeah, I think that's what I would submit here.
Thank you, Elizabeth. What do you think, Obaa?
Yes, just to build on Elizabeth's submission on policies, I think I would perhaps look at it from the point of view of, having fragmented policies. So youth employment generally I see sits at the intersection of education, agriculture, industry, digital transformation, etc. But it appears that, well, in most of the countries, our policies do not speak to each other. So they tend to be they operate in silos essentially. And so when I think of, for example, some of the policies that have been implemented in Ghana and in the recent past, the previous government, for example, put together a program called Planting for Food and Jobs. And it pretty much centered on farmer productivity and not necessarily youth employment. And so there was very much limited connection between, making that program as an agricultural, transformation program work in line with youth employment. I can also think of, for example, some of the parallel programs that we tend to have again in Ghana. So we have Youth Employment Agency, we have the National Entrepreneurship and Innovation Program that tend to run parallel youth skilling and entrepreneurship programs. And so while these are very much needed, I think that the most important thing is to allow for that kind of coordination to ensure that the policies speak to each other and support each other in really providing the employment opportunities that young people so much need. The other bit comes from the work I did at the African Center for Economic Transformation, and they talk a lot about growth with jobs. And what they talk about is the fact that there's insufficient growth, job creation, whereas we do see economic growth in a lot of African countries. And so again, limiting it to Ghana, Ghana is a middle income country. Yet when we think about, unemployment rates, maybe I can limit it to 15 to 35. The Ghana Statistical Service places it at 23%, right? And so we're seeing that the rate of growth, economic growth, is not necessarily matching the pace at which jobs are needed to be created, right? And so that also then creates this insufficiency that we see. Sort of moving from the top level to perhaps organizational level, I think we can also reflect on, some of the generational power dynamics. And I think this is something that Elizabeth has already alluded to, the experience trap. And so this experience trap where, I can give an example of a job application I saw from a think tank based in Ghana, and they were looking for a research assistant. What they were asking for was a master degree. They were looking for a master degree holder for a research assistant and 2 academic publications. And I thought that was just ridiculous, because then again, that means you're crowding out, first-time job seekers and really saying that I'm looking for an older person, essentially. There are other gendered controls as well, particularly when it comes to women's reproductive rights. There was again another famous case in Ghana where lawyers, surprisingly, young women lawyers were asked to sign contracts not to give birth in the next 3 years to ensure that their jobs are secure. And so essentially what we are trying to say is that women leave part of yourself at the door so that you can do your job, right? It's almost as if you can't have both. And so when we see these kind of social elements in the hiring process, then, opportunities become privilege, not necessarily right. And of course, also Elizabeth has talked about credential inflation, which also is something that we have to deal with, where again, young people have to get a degree and another, yet again, still face unemployment and underemployment. And so for me, these are some of the structural barriers that I can think about at various levels that really weaken job opportunities that are available. Thank you.
Thank you, Obaa. I wish that we had a much larger audience besides our developmental community. You are all thinking the same thoughts, to hear what you two women have to say, because there's some great ideas there. It reminds me, Obaa, what you've just said earlier on. It took me back to my first conversation with you when you said it's not so much in Africa about finding formal employment, but making a living. And that's the reality. When we talked about how I go back to Zimbabwe, and there are young youth with not just A levels and O levels, but university degrees standing on street corners selling toilet paper. How can we make entrepreneurship a realistic path for young people and not just a buzzword? What would you say to that, Obaa? Because I know you had some strong ideas on that.
Well, let's see. So I think that for me, my thoughts about entrepreneurship sometimes is that we treat it as a default prescription. And I say this because in my work in civil society in Ghana and some of the other spaces that I was in, it appeared that's what everybody was saying, go be an entrepreneur, as though that is the silver bullet to address unemployment. And it was couched in a very attractive, empowering, safe language. But for me, I think what that does in many ways is to place the responsibility of, finding jobs on young people, rather than really addressing the systemic and structural issues that really limit job opportunities for young people. That notwithstanding, I still think that entrepreneurship has a role in, allowing people to build their resilience and reduce their vulnerability in making a living. I think one of the ways we can do so is by making entrepreneurship market orientated. So what I mean here is that I think increasingly we need to find entrepreneurship or enterprises that solve our problems. One of the big jokes that we make in Ghana is that everybody just buys and sells, right? Rather than really creating solutions to the problems that we need. And so if our enterprises, particularly from our young people, are responding to our local needs, for example, logistics, it could be waste recycling, solar installation, whatever. I think what that does is that these enterprises meet a real need, and also you have a ready market for your enterprise. And I do see this happening particularly along the cocoa and shea butter value chain, where a number of young people are plugging in to provide, value addition to these raw materials, because for the longest time we've actually been primary producers. And so we're seeing that young people are also making significant gains from, these kinds of initiatives. I also think that it's important for us to also think about the mechanisms generally that can support entrepreneurship to thrive. I think that for many of the enterprises, they don't do well in isolation. They need an ecosystem to, function. And so if, for example, there are mentorship networks, there are business development services, incubators, accelerators. I do see this again happening in Ghana quite a bit. And so these are becoming ways that enterprises are sort of tapping into existing resources and support systems within the environment to be able to, make to ensure that their businesses thrive. And I think another very critical aspect still relating to the support mechanisms would be reliable infrastructure. And I talk about two examples, roads and internet. The cost of internet in Ghana doesn't make sense, in my opinion, way too costly. And so for small businesses, for example, this really crowds them out. and they are not able to then take advantage of the digital innovation and, the goodies of social media, for example, in really expanding and meeting, expanding their businesses. Another example that comes to mind has to do with transport. So for example, one of my colleagues lives in Accra, but has a farm in a rural district. And he talks about how poor conditions really cost him a lot because he's not able to transport his goods from the farm to the market centers. He hasn't been able to invest in storage facilities yet because he's still in the initial phases. And so when I blow this up to other enterprises or other young entrepreneurs, I do see how such, the lack of such infrastructure then can affect their progress. And the last bit that I will talk about, perhaps, which for me is a bit difficult and I don't really have a very neat answer to, would be having access to long patient capital. I think that our financial institutions are not exactly very generous to young enterprises because, young people tend to, they don't see them as credit worthy, and so do not necessarily give them the kind of funds to be able to expand their businesses. And so, yeah, it would be nice. I don't have a very, should I say, structured way of thinking about this, but really, long patient capital would also be helpful. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Obaa, again, giving us so much to think about. Is there anything you'd like to add to what Obaa has said, Elizabeth?
Well, I think Obaa has really covered a lot of some of the things that I wanted to talk about, and one of them being the fact that talking about entrepreneurship, it is a good thing, but now it seems like it's something that everyone is saying, okay, fine, you need to, okay, one size fits all. But the truth of the matter is, it's almost as if you are bundling everything to young people. This is what you need to do. Well, you don't have a job because you're not entrepreneurs. But the whole entrepreneurship is also multi-dimensional, and it tackles a lot of things like what Obaa was saying. Issues to do with the markets, for example. And she spoke something about agriculture and that someone can farm, and then where are they going to sell those products? And with that project I was talking about, Acadus, which is literally agriculture, even when you give them capital, the problem still comes in the markets themselves. Where are they going to sell the markets? Where are they going to sell their products? So it's not a one size fits all. It's not just saying, okay, fine, you need to become an entrepreneur, but it's about looking at the whole value chain. When they become entrepreneurs, if they are involved in the agriculture sector, if they have their own businesses, then what happens next? And that's the reason why, even when we're talking about, we know that in Africa, we have the African Continental Free Trade Area. And Africa just coming together and saying that we need to talk about having a single market. Those are some of the issues that need to come in, saying that these young people, yes, they want to come into entrepreneurship, but how do we actually remove the non-tariff barriers? How do we make sure that the process becomes easier so that they can trade within the continent, within communities? So, yeah, I think it's pretty much what Obaa was talking about when it comes to entrepreneurship. Yeah.
Thank you, Elizabeth. I have many more questions I would like to ask you, but I think I need to open this up to the audience because we are running out of time. Before I move to that, I would like to just look at a chat that I've read from Pamela Magandi, who says that maybe we need to be looking at how we educate children, because maybe the education is what it is. I'll read what she said precisely. I may be repeating thoughts and ideas that have been discussed, but growing up, one of the questions that was asked was, what do you want to be when you grow up? We all got that. The expected responses usually were mainline jobs, and I really don't remember self-employment or entrepreneurship being a thing. That makes me think that perhaps what is required is a whole shift in the way of thinking to fit the economies that we live in. I'm rambling, but do you think that the education system has a role in preparing young people? Very quickly, and then I'm going to open this up to questions from the floor. So what do you say in response to that question from Pamela Mangandi?
I think what Pamela is actually what I was trying to draw to at the very beginning when I was talking about certain stereotypes, right? I was trying to say the same thing, that maybe there's also a need for kind of a shift. We think, yes, maybe the education sector can help in terms of that. For example, like we're saying, you should be an entrepreneur, but is the education
You're breaking up, Elizabeth.
literacy? Oh, am I breaking up? Can you hear me?
We can now. Thank you.
Oh, okay, fine. Okay, so I was just saying that some of the issues that Pamela was talking about, how we look at employment, how the whole education system can change, and it still aligns to what Obaa was saying about the whole issue of policy alignment. We can just say this is unemployment. You see that it has to be aligned even to issues of education. We say young people, okay, you need to be entrepreneurs, but when we look at the education system, is it actually preparing those young people to be part of entrepreneurship? And also the issue of stereotypes. I think she said something about her when she was growing up. And it's the same thing when I was talking about the stereotypes in agriculture. Growing up, most of us were told that we need to be doctors, that we need to be nurses, that we need to be teachers, because it brings in a certain type of prestige. But if you actually say that I want to be an entrepreneur, then it becomes a problem. No, you're my child, you're educated, you have a PhD, you can't be an entrepreneur. You can't be in the agriculture sector. So it does require the whole thinking also around unemployment, how it can be changed, and also, yeah, what I was saying, breaking some certain stereotypes of what women should do, what women shouldn't do, of what types of careers should be there, which types of careers should you join. Yeah, I think that's my comment.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
Yes.
Anything to add, Obaa?
Yes. I think Pamela has set me thinking on, a number of things. I hope I'm able to be consistent in my thoughts. I think that in addition to what Elizabeth has said, I think what we do see is also a bit of a confrontation of these stereotypical views about what is employment or what are jobs by the young people. I think one thing that I do hear from the older generation, and pardon me if I step on some toes here, is the discomfort, for example, of parents when they see that their children are now, for example, social media celebrities, right? Now, people are making a living on social media in a way that I wouldn't have expected at the at the break of social media, right? And so now we're seeing very unconventional ways of making a living that really blows my mind. There are times that we hear about informal businesses or people who are perhaps just selling on TikTok, and the amount of monies that they are talking about raking in on a monthly or a yearly basis, these are taxable incomes that our governments are not even thinking about. And so I think that what the young people also do is really to confront the realities, to say that, well, if there are no jobs, then perhaps I might have to, find a way to make a living within the informal space that does not necessarily, match what is expected. But I'm also very cautious about, romanticizing the informal economy, because I also know that in the long term, there's pretty much precarity because there's no pensions, there's no, fallback mechanism and whatnot. So I'm also a lot conscious about that. But I do see a bit of pushback from the young people themselves. Yeah.
Thank you, Obaa. I see that Vanita has a hand up. So Vanita, please go ahead and ask your question. Vanita, can you hear me?
Yes. Thank you, Meru. Yeah, I was just about to leave, but I'm glad I have the opportunity. Elizabeth, I wanted to just quickly ask about that organization you pointed us to right at the outset on agriculture. I think it was on your first slide. I'd be keen to know what is the success? Do they employ people? What is their success rate? And I'm using success in inverted commas of actually creating employment. I'm asking this because I want to bring together, the things, the exclusionary factors, rural women types of work. And I think that organization that you talked about attempts to address those three exclusionary factors, and possibly also to some extent people with disabilities. Has it had any success in that regard? And if so, how and to what extent?
Okay, so we've had a lot of successes because it tackles a lot of aspects, one of it being the fact that young people themselves, they don't have enough capital to start their, let's say, even if they want to have businesses, I mean, not businesses, but in agriculture in general, some of them don't have capital. So we also have that aspect where we're able to give them a little money that we also get from funding. And I think it was Obaa who was saying the fact that capital remains one of the hindrances in terms of young people, because when they go to the banks, then they can't get it because they are told collateral and stuff. But with this organization, Akares, what we do is that we are saying, okay, fine, you don't need to have any collateral. What you need to do is you get organized, you get in a group. It's kind of a group, right? It's a friendly group. So it's friends, 5 of them, let's say 5 of them, they have a kind of a group, and then they request the capital. So what we are saying is that if one of them actually defaults, then they don't pay, the other 4 are going to be responsible to pay for, so they kind of hold each other accountable. And so far, we started, in terms of the capital, we started about 2 years ago, and so far, in terms of returning the money, we've had like over 95% success rates in terms of giving back the money. And then, even with that organization, remember what I was talking about the whole stereotypes around agriculture, the fact that it has always been seen as not connected, pretty much connected to technology. So that's when we actually brought in the AI aspect to it. That, okay, fine, as you saw in one of the photos, that we're trying to change the whole image around agriculture, having in mind that it contributes to about 40% of the GDP, and the fact that food security remains one of the biggest challenges in Africa. So we're trying to change the whole image around agriculture and say, no, you can actually be in agriculture and also use technology. You can actually be in agriculture and also use your smartphones. And to be honest, all these things we're also learning a lot from China. When we look at China and talking about how they're talking about smart agriculture, which actually has kind of attracted young people to come into this sector and changing the whole agriculture perspective. So far, it has really been a success, and we have about 3,000 young people that are connected on that AI app. So the AI app actually helps them in terms of, okay, fine, this is the weather, this is what you need to do when it comes to if your crops are what do you call them? Smart teachers, kind of. So they don't need to go into a space to learn about something. We upload everything on that app, and then they can actually access it from home, and then they can access it in different spaces. So we have like a network of about 3,000. It has really become big, yeah. I hope I've responded to what you were asking me.
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any more questions from the listeners? If not, I have one that I'd like to ask. In your opinions, Elizabeth and Obaa, who do you think is ultimately responsible for opening doors for young children? Is it government? Is it private sector? Is it educators? Is it the youth themselves? What has your experience taught you or guided you towards?
Perhaps I could have a go. Well, I do believe that youth employment issues do not sit neatly within a single ministry or within the ambit of a single, stakeholder group. I think that all these stakeholders have a role to play. So for example, when I think about government, I can think of really creating an enabling environment. So ensuring policy coherence, as I talked about earlier, providing the necessary infrastructure, providing incentives for job creation. And here I'd like to, again, be a bit controversial to give examples from my home country. We do see a lot of tax breaks for foreign investors, all well and good. But I also do think that our young entrepreneurs and their enterprises also would have to enjoy some of these tax breaks. And also simplifying business registration. It can be a nightmare in Ghana, again, registering a business. And one of the difficulty that a lot of people that I've spoken to, one of my friends was trying to register a consultancy business. And what he found on the website of the institution that he needed to go to, he followed that, and then he gets to the office, and then the person there was like, well, you know what you have on the website is very different from what happens in person. So I was like, okay, how am I then supposed to know how to register a business? And so we do need to ensure that we are also aligning our interventions and the development that we're trying, the modernization we tend to call it, that we're trying to, create within our agencies to ensure that the processes are also a lot more streamlined. And I think that it's important that government takes their role, because even their best youth employment programs can fail if the wider economy is not, strong. I also believe that for the private sector, they also can be a pretty strong engine for creating sustainable jobs. But then again, they also need to be a bit more fair in their hiring processes, offer a lot of partnerships with the educational institutions, because again, we hear a lot of conversations around the universities are providing, theoretical knowledge. They're very much limited in the practical aspect of things. And so again, partnership between these institutions matter. I also think that the education system itself also has a role to play. Again, teaching competencies beyond the theoretical knowledge. And I are adjusting to ensure that soft skills, for example, soft skills are prioritized to give their students the kind of needed skills that the industry so badly requires. And so if we train students who do not have the skills that are needed needed for the job market, then they can be a. I also think that development partners have a role to play. Although I do know that within the landscape, things.
Oops. Obaa, you still there? It looks like we've lost Obaa temporarily. Until she comes back, I'm going to quickly, I see that we have questions from the floor. Elizabeth, I hope you don't mind that I'm going to go. Oh, sorry. Okay, here you're back. We lost you for a bit.
Yes, I realized. Okay. My apologies. So I was talking about development partners, and I was just saying that I do realize that within the space, there's been a lot of change, but I do realize that they also do have their contribution to ensuring that opportunities are created. And I can give example of, for example, the Climate Innovation Center in Ghana. Very much, am I, oh dear.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. That also provides funding support for incubators and accelerators in Ghana. And I think the last group that I would like to talk about is young people. And I really want to also emphasize that they are not just passive recipients of the interventions that have we've been talking about. They're also innovators. They're trying to solve the problem, because they do realize that they need to, contribute to ensuring that their voices are heard in terms of policy, and also create job opportunities directly. And so for me, I do see that one single intervention may not be enough, but then a coordinated system is actually needed to ensure that we create the sustainable jobs that is so much needed.
Thank you, Obaa. Elizabeth, I'm going to turn to questions from the floor so that we don't lose the audience. I know that we have a question from, and I hope I'm pronouncing this right, Menenle, would you like to go ahead and ask your question? You're on mute. You're muted.
Hi, sorry about that. First of all, thank you so much for presenting, Obaa and Elizabeth. Very insightful insights. I think my question has been answered mostly by Obaa, but just to add on is that I think on a policy level, there needs to be a revision on what entails formality and informality, because I think we're still working in binaries and there isn't a hard line between formality and informality, and what we perceived as informal is becoming formal. As you've mentioned, Obaa, careers are becoming more digital among the young people, and to them it is a formal way of earning an income. And I think we need to revisit the new ways people are earning an income in non-conventional ways and see whether it's actually a formal way of work. Aside from that, I did mention in the comment on pedagogy in basic education, how we teach and how people learn and what they learn is so pivotal to how the industry is evolving. What's happening in many schools still is a very conventional and traditional way of learning, which children need to change in order to be prepared for the fast-paced industrial revolution that's happening on the continent.
Thank you. Monica, I see your hand is up. Would you like to ask your question?
Yeah, thanks a lot, Obaa and Elizabeth. Shout out to Elizabeth. I'm your fellow Malawian here. Hi.
For those of you who don't know,
So,
Monica was our last speaker in June at the World Bank. This is Monica Longway.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you very much, Meru. So this is quite an interesting topic. I haven't worked with the youth a lot, so it's been very insightful for me. And the last question that you asked, Meru, I'm happy with the response that Obaa gave. It was quite comprehensive, because I think for every intervention across the development sector, we really need to think about the ecosystem, the whole ecosystem. And I think the emphasis that was placed on the parenting and the role that parents play, I think it's very important, because when I work in the I usually use the socio-ecological model at the individual level, the family level, the community level, the policy level, the institutional level, all levels. So I think that's the socio-ecological model. I think it's a good way that could be implemented across the sectors. And because the family institution is very important, it's quite influential. So when we talk about the youth and what shapes the youth and how they perceive the world, it's really coming from the family. Very important. I just wanted to comment on that as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Monica. Madeline, I know you had your hand up. I don't know if your question's been answered. You're on mute. You're on.
Hi. Thank you very much. To me, living here in South Africa and in Johannesburg, it is, to me, so important that it's a city and it's vibrant and it's going on, but we have to look at the rural areas and the huge expansion and all in Africa, because we're a typical African country. To me, the most painful part is the self-respect we are denying any youth or any person who hasn't got a job. And we always talk about the formal jobs in the sense of being trained, have a degree. Now you talk about 3 degrees and still no job. But the majority of people don't even finish high school. But they need to be able to look after themselves. They need to be independent and have worth in what they do. I had one good story here in South Africa. It's an environmental group of people. What do they call it? The ecosystem thing, because the thicket of the countryside was ruined over the years from the 60s. It was, overgrazed. And here they've started, well, they're working on 100,000 jobs for 800,000 hectare. And it becomes the whole society over there, the whole community revival, and it's an ecosystem revival, and at the same side. So there are hundreds of people planting little plants in this vast, it's in the Eastern Cape, Elizabeth, if you want to go and have a look at that. And it is by a person planting plants for a future, it is worth it. He gets a minimum salary, but he can look after himself, or she can look after herself. And with that, they also have nurseries. So everything that you start just builds up. I mean, they have about, I don't know how many organizations who work together. I mean, they got the they got the UNEP World Restoration Flagship Prize now recently. But I think the big problem lies with having everyone have a job that they feel worth, and that they know it makes a difference to the community, makes a difference to the whole society. All levels are important, and we've kind of, I feel we've been very elitist about always thinking about, you've got to be either this in the media, or you this influencer. That's elitist in a way today. And I just think we shouldn't forget the hand labor, the hard work ones. And, I'd like unemployment to be thought of the whole group. I mean, if you have a gardener, he has a full-time job, he's doing a wonderful work, and it's on all levels. And in Africa, I think we should really appreciate every level of work. And somebody mentioned China. I mean, the person who sweeps the streets, yes, a government pays him, but they really have worth. That's their job for their life. But we don't have that in South Africa, where we'll have a pension afterwards, and you get a little SASSA grant. But I think unemployment in Africa and all developing countries, it's truly a big problem. But I appreciated what you said and how you explained it. To me, it was a wonderful moment here sharing with you. Thank you so much, all of you.
Do we have any more questions from the floor? I have a few, but I know that our time is running out. I think what I would like to say to both Obaa and Elizabeth is that and I'm sure we all have, learned so much from just hearing you speak of your experiences, of what you're doing, of your ideas. I wish there was a way in which we can get you to a wider audience, because more people need to have benefited from this hour that we've had with you. I mean, yes, people talk about youth unemployment and problems in the world, but not enough people know what is happening and what is being done, and that there are brilliant minds and people on the ground like you that are doing what you're doing, that need to force others into action or thought or thinking. So I cannot tell you on behalf of Meg how absolutely proud we are of you two amazing, exceptional women who are doing great work. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to add anything? I think I would like to have a huge poster of both of you put up in the World Bank to say, you guys, what are you missing? Just listen to all the ideas that are out there. Would anyone, if you don't have a question, if there's any comment you'd like to make before we close off? I know that we've run beyond our 1 hour, and I see Priscilla has a hand up. So yes, please, Priscilla, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, first of all. This was extremely interesting. I guess what I'd like to say is there's a lot of interest in this subject right now. And if you could design one program, no matter how small, in your country, what would you design? What would you ask for to get the resources from these multilateral organizations to give you a chance, the African Development Bank or the World Bank or whatever's out there, United Nations. What kind of a program would you think would be most beneficial for your country? It doesn't have to be anything fancy. I was just curious about, where the resources could be allocated best.
Well,
I
oh, you can go ahead, Obaa.
I'll be talking a bit, so I won't catch my breath. But I will attempt to answer this. I think this is a really difficult question, but here goes nothing. I think that I will perhaps invest in accelerator and incubator programs in Ghana, for example. I think mainly because they are able to, provide structured support to young entrepreneurs and their enterprises. So for me, I would want to think about such incubators and accelerators, and give them that kind of funding and the kind of support that they need to be able to then sort of pass on the support to other enterprises and young entrepreneurs. That would be my answer.
Thank you.
Well, I think, yeah, that's a difficult question because I would have a lot of things that I would do. But then I think if I was given one chance, what I would do is I would have a mentorship program, something that would be designed for young people so that they get to understand in terms of what careers that they would want to be in, to understand. I'm saying this because as I said at the beginning, that it's also part of my experience being a lecturer. Sometimes I also kind of get disappointed in a university setting where we've had a training 2 years and then I get an email and say, what are the types of jobs that I'm supposed to look for? Or, oh, I got into this public policy, but I just got into it because I got accepted into it. But I'm not sure if that's what I want. I'm not sure what I'm going to do after that. So I think my program would be something that would be aligned to the university setting so that when the young people are actually getting into the university, then they also get to understand what's the reason why you're choosing what you're choosing. Are you just choosing it because you're being taught that you need to have certain qualifications? Is this really what you want? Is this really that will give you meaning to your life? So I think it would be kind of like a mentorship program, which I feel like is actually lacking. And it all fits into the whole, even when I was talking about agriculture, so that they also understand that it's actually okay to be in the agriculture sector. And I think there was the time when we're talking about plumbing. It's okay for you to be a plumber. It's okay. It's also fine. So it would be centered around that. So that's why I keep on saying my program would do something also with breaking the stereotypes around employment or unemployment level. Yeah.
Really interesting. I would just like to mention that there is something in the US called the Anthropology Career Readiness Network, ACRN, online, and they do very much this kind of thing of trying to help young anthropologists not go into academia, but go into practical jobs. And even though it would be parallel to what you're doing, you might want to check it out because they often have some very, very good ideas, and they don't apply just to anthropology. They apply to, job readiness in general. It's a very good organization. It's all volunteer.
Oh, okay, fine. Yeah, I've taken note of that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, Thank you, everyone. First of all, the biggest thank you to Elizabeth and Obaa for this absolutely fascinating, educational, informative, interesting hour that we've had. You inspire us and you humble us. So thank you very, very much. Thank you to all the participants. Thank you for being here to share in this. We feel really honored to be blessed with the presence of such amazing young women, and you just reinforce again why MEG is where we are and what we're doing. So may we continue to reach more and more exceptional women doing even more exceptional work. So on behalf of MEG, thank you very, very much. I don't know if Vesna wants to add anything, but we will be following your careers. Long may you continue to do what you're doing. And please do also keep us informed every time you reach milestones, which we're sure you will be doing regularly. So thank you. Thank you very much. Thanks, everyone. Have a good week and a weekend.